point people in what direction for PBL resources?
So there's a number of places I'd go. One is the Edutopia website, and that's a terrific, Lucas Education, George Lucas Educational Foundation has provided a lot of money. They funded our work in part along with the Spencer Foundation, and so they have videos and articles about teaching project-based learning. So that's one place. The Buck Institute is another place. That's an institution that provides professional development for teachers to go and learn how to do project-based learning. And they have a ton of resources, like I mentioned, where you can searchable. So you can go to their website and search, different projects. Expeditionary Learning is another organization that website you can go to, and they have units there, that you could go and check out. The curriculum that I designed with Nell Duke is on Nell Duke's webpage, and I can give you the URL. And those 4 units are all downloadable, and they could be something that people could check out and use and adapt. There's also a lot of books. Nell Duke has written one called Information in Action: Powerful Reading and Writing for an Information-Driven World, and that's talks about using project-based learning, in literacy. And so there's a lot of books out there, and the Buck Institute has also John Larmer and John Mergendoller and others have written books on project-based learning. So I think those would be the main resources I would suggest.
Okay. Any advice on how teachers should prepare their kids? So you have your project plan now, everything's ready to go. Any ways you prepare your students for this experience in project-based learning?
Mm-hmm. I think one thing is for students to realize that there's a lot of, at least if you're going to do writing with this, that there's writing as a process, and then there's drafts, and then there's revision, and so forth. So I just say that because there's so much with project-based learning, the final product is you want it to be really polished, and so realizing that it's not going to be perfect, ever, but it's not going to be, exactly how you want it the first time, and so it's going to go through some revision. So I think kids oftentimes want to be done with it, want to write it and done with it, and so realizing that it's, adults in the real world, when they do something like this, it goes through lots of revision. So that's one thing. Another thing, like I mentioned, was the idea of collaboration, and then how do you get kids to work together and share and take turns and really listen to one another and listen to their ideas rather than just listening to themselves talk. So I think about, how do we work together in groups? So even thinking about having them play games where they have to take turns, and, observe each other and so forth. I think organization is also a big step, so figure out, how are we going to organize our room, spend a couple days just, this, where in the room are we going to do the project, and what happens when we're done with the project but we're continuing to work on it tomorrow, like where do we put it, so even thinking like that, it's like teachers know how to do all that stuff, but it's being very explicit with the kids about this is a different kind of learning because it's going to go on. We might not be done with it until Thanksgiving, so that's a long time. So we want to think about how can we keep our work, ongoing and, in a safe spot that we can get in return to. So I think organization and group work and collaboration and even independent work, how do I work on something independently and then provide peer feedback? Because that's another really nice component you could have kids give each other feedback on their work. So how do we provide constructive feedback that's encouraging and not, critical?
Right.
Yes, because kids can be really honest with each other.
That does need practice oftentimes.
Yeah, exactly. And I also think about even like how do we, all of our projects that had presentations, they all had presentations to it. The session 20 was always like the presentation, or the, whatever kind of, delivery. But then session 19 was the practice for it. And it was like a dress rehearsal. I mean, we went through 45 minutes of just practicing the whole thing before. And so realizing that, like, yes, it might seem kind of tedious and boring, but adults, they do their homework, before they go and they do some kind of thing like that. So that's the kind of things I would think about.
So any other advice for teachers or words of encouragement to actually give this a go and try it and see how you like it?
Sure. Well, it's so worth it. It's worth the risks, it's worth the headaches, the challenges. Just to see your kids coming to school excited, like, are we working on our project today? Or to have a family member come in and say, what's this good since the service you're providing to the, can you tell me more about this? To have, that home family connection, homeschool connection is so important. And so I think, just taking risks, it's hard, it's really challenging, it's unnerving, it's a big shift from traditional approaches, but you'll find that it really is worth it when you see the rich content and the way the kids are able to use the skills you're working so hard to teach the kids and apply them in ways that are meaningful. For them to say, oh, this is why we have to spend so much time analyzing graphs. Oh, wow, this is what people do in the real world. They do surveys, and then they analyze the surveys to figure out, which, direction to take in doing something. And so for them to make those connections, another thing to emphasize too is that what's really cool is when kids make connections between their projects and then other learning in other parts of the day. And for us, we couldn't anticipate that, because we weren't sure what the curriculum that the rest of the teachers were doing the rest of the day. But when teachers would come and say to us, hey, you know what, when the kids were reading these maps and interpreting them, when I was teaching something else during the day, when I was teaching in my reading block, they were able to understand, oh, this is, what a diagram is, or this is, what a legend is. And so for them to be able to make those connections, it's just so empowering, and it's just really validating. So I'd say go for it, take a risk, and also don't be too hard on yourself if it is challenging, because it will be, and it's going to be messy, but you're going to learn from that, and I think you'll just really find that it's worth the challenge.
Great. And finally, one more question. If you could describe PBL or sum it up in 3 words, what would it be?
This wasn't on my list.
I know. It's my surprise question for everyone.
I know. It's a good one. Let's see, 3 words. I'd say authentic. I would say challenging and meaningful.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
This was my pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity, Kelly.